We understand what the Jimmy Butler trade is, and it's coming up soon. The Suns signaled this with their recent action on screen, trading their only available first-round pick, which is in 2031, to the Jazz for 3 future first-round selections. This kind of deal is only made if a Butler trade is already arranged, so I anticipate Jimmy Butler might be traded later today, according to when this video was recorded, or possibly later this week. Regardless, here's how it looks. I realize this seems chaotic and complex, but when the trade actually occurs, I hope you return to this channel to watch our coverage, as there will be plenty to discuss, and I'll break it all down for you. Now, let's review what Phoenix needed to happen, which we've addressed in previous videos to acquire Jimmy Butler. First, they required Bradley Beal to waive his no-trade clause. Until that occurred, trading for Butler was impossible. There was no feasible salary arrangement that allowed them to acquire Butler without giving up Beal, who could reject any trade offered to him. It appears that by trading a 2031 first-round pick, which is the top pick in this exchange for 3 future first-round picks, they're confident Beal will waive his clause, potentially to join Milwaukee. Phoenix has been working to finalize this deal for some time. They shift Bradley Beal to the bench, and it's evident he isn't pleased. Milwaukee still offers at least some chance for him to possibly pursue a championship or compete, and if he's looking to exit Phoenix, waiving his no-trade clause is the initial move that opens up all other possibilities. Next, they had to identify a team genuinely interested in Bradley Beal, and there weren't many available options. My assumption was he wouldn't end up with a contender or a team like Milwaukee, which we'll discuss later, but rather with a team like Detroit or other franchises willing to absorb Beal's hefty contract while acquiring some assets, despite a lack of interest in him as a player. However, according to reports, Phoenix has located the team that truly wants Bradley Beal, and that team is Milwaukee. This development, in turn, unlocks all subsequent steps. The next challenge is securing enough assets to captivate Miami's interest in the deal, as merely offering pick swaps or the future 2031 first-round pick wasn't sufficient for Miami. They require more. They find themselves in a unique position regarding their readiness to compete, with Tyler Herro and Bam Adebayo both being solid players. However, they are not performing well, and the situation with Jimmy is evidently a distraction. They don't wish to abandon the season. They are looking for future assets and immediate win-now assets. At the time everything surfaced, when it became apparent that Jimmy intended to join Phoenix, the Suns lacked the necessary assets to facilitate that deal. It now appears they have those assets with this selection and the proposed trade framework we'll discuss. Lastly, it's essential to identify a team that can accommodate the salary requirements, as even with the trade I presented, it can't go through until certain contract issues are resolved. I believe that, based on reports and my own analysis of this trade, it is going to happen. They seem to have figured out how to meet all 4 criteria. Let me display the trade again. Milwaukee acquires Bradley Beal along with 2 first-round picks, while Utah receives the Suns' first-round pick, which has already been traded. I included it in the trade machine for simplicity, with the Suns assuming some salary. Additionally, the Suns would obtain Jimmy Butler, while the Miami Heat would get Chris Middleton, Bobby Portis, Bam, and a future first-round pick from Cleveland. But it ultimately relates back to that Suns trade involving 3 first-round picks exchanged in Milwaukee's deal. Their intention here is to move forward. Based on the Chris Middleton situation, they are prepared to take a risk by bringing in Bradley Beal as the scoring boost they need. Middleton has faced numerous injury problems in recent years and has not been particularly fit this season. They are looking to revamp their roster with this bold move by adding Beal to a backcourt that already features Damian Lillard. More crucially, they aim to regain assets and flexibility on their roster, which they achieve by acquiring these 2 first-round picks. I will return to those 2 picks later, so keep them in mind. The mentality for Milwaukee is essentially to trade Beal for Middleton, along with several other role players, and in return, they receive 2 first-round picks. Utah is already known to be part of this Suns trade that has occurred, which is a great deal for them. If you're a fan of Utah, it doesn't get any better. The 3 first-round picks they received from Cleveland and Minnesota are the least favorable ones from those teams, likely landing in the 20s. Additionally, they also acquired a 2031 first-round pick from Phoenix, which might be a disaster in 2031. Overall, it's an excellent deal for Utah. Phoenix's intentions are clear. They have been pursuing Jimmy Butler for nearly a month now, and Jimmy finally gets what he desired. He travels to Phoenix, and I honestly don't see how much that truly assists their team. Beal hasn't performed well, but Butler hasn't either. I'm uncertain about that pairing, though it might be enough to shake things up within the roster. Perhaps they can offload Jusuf Nurkic to a team and acquire some assets and other components for their lineup. I still doubt Phoenix will be very strong, but their reasoning for wanting Butler is quite understandable. Meanwhile, Miami picks up Middleton, who isn't an exceptional asset but aids them this year, turning into a significant expiring contract next season. They can strategize with him. Bobby Portis is on board since Milwaukee must find a way to balance the salaries, and he had to end up somewhere. I thought maybe Miami might be interested in Bobby Portis. Beauchamp is also in the mix, and they secure a future first-round pick for either flexibility or to use in 2027. I merely guessed which years each team would have out of these first-round selections. And that serves as the rationale for each team involved. Now, there are a few important things to remember. Milwaukee cannot proceed with this trade until they shed some salary. As a second apron team, Milwaukee cannot combine salaries, meaning they cannot part with more than one player in a transaction while they are above the second apron. Therefore, they need to remove some salary before finalizing everything. A name that's frequently mentioned is Pat Kahn, who might be heading to Detroit. Perhaps they will send some draft assets or a young player to Detroit to fall below the second apron, allowing Milwaukee to complete this deal. I also mentioned previously that I would refer back to those future first-round picks for the Bucks. If you're a Bucks fan, this could be really thrilling as you could acquire 2 future first-round picks. However, I'm not entirely certain that they would receive 2 first-round picks since Phoenix might be utilizing one of those picks to trade away Jusuf Nurkic, potentially acquiring players from a team like Portland, which has been discussed as a prospect for that trade. This is something we'll need to monitor closely to see if it comes to fruition. I gave Milwaukee 2 first-round picks in this scenario because they are parting with a significant amount, including half of their rotation and taking on the B contract, so I felt they would likely receive more than just 1 first-round pick. However, perhaps they are simply that eager to modify the lineup, but that first-round pick could potentially become part of a deal involving Kit. The reason Kit is excluded from this arrangement for Phoenix is due to their status as a second apron team, and similar to Milwaukee, they are unable to trade multiple players in a single transaction. Therefore, the Nage matter would need to take place separately from this arrangement. With all those factors considered, if they can organize everything, Jimmy Butler will find his way to Phoenix, while Chris Middleton will likely land in Miami, where I anticipate he will remain, finishing out the year and aiming to compete in the playoffs as they traditionally do, thus allowing Milwaukee to acquire Bradley Beal. There are a couple of issues here that could potentially stall the entire trade. 1. Beal must actually waive his no-trade clause. I presume he has consented to do so, which is why Phoenix proceeded with the deal that involved acquiring the draft picks. There's no convincing me that Phoenix is inclined to split that first-round pick into 3 lesser ones unless it assists in facilitating the Butler trade, and you wouldn't make that decision unless you are certain that the Butler trade is essentially sorted out, which would have to involve Bradley Beal indicating he wishes to join Milwaukee. The other concern that may hold this up for me is my uncertainty. What the Bucks are doing is understandable. Trading Middleton for Beal and acquiring 2 first-round picks makes complete sense to me, even though Beal's contract is problematic. Maybe you see it as an even swap, gaining some firsts while allowing for future flexibility with your roster. However, what frustrates me is that they are forfeiting 5 players in the trade due to the salary gap between Middleton and Beal. There's an $18 million difference they need to address. That's why Bobby Portis has to be included, alongside Jalen Duren and Taurean Prince. This could just be Brook Lopez, who could potentially go elsewhere. Personally, I'd prefer to retain Brook Lopez over any of these other players. Now, Milwaukee faces the challenge of being back over the second apron. They can't trade for or sign any buyout players because of their salary situation, and their free agency choices are very restricted. Essentially, they're relinquishing half their rotation just to replace Middleton with Beal, and while it's great that they receive first-round picks, that's the aspect that puzzles me. It's not that this won't go through, rather, if you're questioning its feasibility or potential collapse, it stems from Milwaukee's reluctance to part with so many assets. They could ease this by including Brook Lopez in the trade, and that's acceptable, though that's the part that concerns me. I don't comprehend, but if the Jimmy Butler trade goes down as I anticipate, it's likely happening this week. I believe a structure like this could work. Detroit is probably in the mix, where Pat Connaughton heads to Detroit, and potentially Nurkic goes to another team along with those future first-round picks. However, due to the deal Phoenix executed with the picks and all this reporting plus the various factors involved in the deal, I think this or something similar represents the Jimmy Butler trade.